Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode. Venus Winslow is a published author, speaker, and transformational coach who helps adults heal from a narcissistic upbringing and codependency. After a lifetime of navigating the effects of a malignant narcissistic parent, Pi transformed her own patterns of self-doubt and self-abandonment. She now guides others to break free from these same cycles, rebuild self-trust, and create healthier, more aligned relationships. Pi's work focuses on moving beyond awareness to lasting change, empowering individuals to reclaim their identity, overcome self-doubt, and live with clarity, confidence, and intention. Welcome, Pi, to the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Eleanor. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to show up and share my experiences with dating unavailable men.
Yeah. It's a great topic. It's really in the zeitgeist right now, that's for sure. So we would love to hear if you wanted to share your story of dating and finding love.
Yeah, like I said, it's a long story, and I could talk about it for a very long time. But I'll give you a snapshot, as you mentioned in my bio. So my childhood, growing up with emotionally unavailable parents, set the stage for me to date emotionally unavailable men. And that's the long and short of it. And the thing is that it's like growing up and moving through my life, I knew these things, but I really didn't understand the depth of how deep that impacted every decision that I made in my life. Not just with dating, but like everywhere. So, if you can imagine being a child, a young person growing up into becoming a teenager and a young adult, and never feeling seen, heard, loved, accepted, valued. I wanted that so bad. I had this aching emptiness inside of me, just this incredible loneliness. And I felt really guilty for having it. And my parents didn't value me. My mother was the narcissist in my family. My father was an alcoholic, so he was also very self-centered because he was an addict. But my mother, and it just took me years to figure it out, but there was like this competition she had with me for attention. She didn't want me to shine too bright because she wanted to be in the spotlight. So she took a lot of opportunities to knock me down, and that was the pattern in my childhood. So I didn't feel valued by my parents, and so I didn't value myself, and I didn't know any better. It was so normalized for me, and I had no guidance. I had no sense of self at all because I wasn't really allowed to be myself. So I just chased, whatever love I could find. It didn't matter. And I chased men that they didn't, well, they wanted sex with me. They wanted to have sex with me, but they didn't want to actually know me or, be there for me or, listen or support me in any way. So sometimes I even thought, and here's a funny thing, sometimes I even thought that I didn't care. It's okay if he's, we could have a casual relationship and I would be fine with that. But I always ended up getting hurt. I always ended up attaching, and then it would fall apart and I would be the one with a broken heart. And then I would also put up with a lot of bad behavior because I had this anxious attachment style. So that's how I operated in, well, not even too far into the past, right? Not until I actually like sort of I want to say I don't want to say I cracked the code, but I cracked myself. I cracked the code in myself is what happened. I had to do a lot of work. I had to get really like brutally honest with myself. And I say brutally because it was hard. It was painful to really look at myself and my patterns and what I kept repeating. and to see, and to connect with the pain of my childhood, like really processing all of that. And so once I was able to do that and get to a place where I was ready to not repeat those patterns and to do something differently, that's when I finally found an amazing man who married me, loves me, adores me, and, is very, very consistent in how he shows up in our relationship. And so this is a completely different experience than what I've had in the past, which also made it very challenging for me because different is uncomfortable. And so there's a lot that comes with the journey, but it's possible to do. And becoming very intentional about your past, recognizing it, seeing it, your patterns and what you want for, your best life, your future, your happiness. That is the most important thing that I had to do to find real love.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and open about your story, and I can really resonate with a lot of parts of, especially that longing, the loneliness, just that feeling of like, am I going to be the outsider forever? And watching other people, why is it so easy for them? That type of feeling. So I really resonate with that, and how you got to that point where you were ready to have something different. And in my case, I call it like the enough is enough moment. I just had that. That's like, okay, this is going to stop here. What do I need to do to change this and break the pattern and have something different? So that's really the important thing that I want to keep talking about in this podcast is how do you get to that point and then what do you do? So from your perspective and your work that you've done, can you explain why so many women keep ending up with the emotionally unavailable men as a pattern?
Yeah. And I want to normalize this first because most women think that they're just choosing wrong. Like they're choosing the wrong guys. But what's actually happening is they're just repeating a familiar emotional pattern. Like I said, for people who grew up with a narcissistic or emotionally inconsistent parent, right? Love wasn't stable. It wasn't safe. It wasn't predictable. And so we get in these patterns where we believe subconsciously. It's usually not there on the surface, but it's back there in the undercurrents. We believe we have to earn love. We have to prove our value. We got to work for that connection. We got to be hyper aware of other people's emotions, and we have to manage them and ignore our own needs, ignore everything that's going on with us and focus on the other person. If they're okay, I'll be okay. And yes, that may have been how we survived our childhood. But then in our adult lives, that same dynamic feels like attraction, what we call chemistry. It's often recognition. And like I said, we won't really see this until we start doing that really uncomfortable work and getting honest with ourselves. When our nervous system is activated, when we get that rush of adrenaline, it's, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And so that can be what we mistake for that attraction or that love or that chemistry. And like I said, when we've got to do that work on ourselves and not focus on the other person and say, it's this unavailable person. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to blame other people than to admit that we are participating in our own unhappiness.
Yeah. And that can also be empowering because then we say we're participating in it, therefore we can change it. And yeah, it's like there's the empowering piece is like, this doesn't have to go on forever. We don't have to keep doing this over and over again ad nauseum. It can actually change. So Thank you for bringing that up, because I really want women to know also that even though this is painful and there's a lot of work involved in these things, there is a way out and there is a way to take your power back in this sense. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Absolutely.
So what does this actually look like in a dating scenario, or some things that, in real time that women can kind of be like, is this me? Is this what I'm doing?
Yes. Yes. So it's very consistent. Okay. And you can't see a pattern until it becomes a pattern. So I also often tell women, don't be hard on yourself. Don't be like super judgmental and harsh and critical with yourself if you don't see this pattern, because you can't see the pattern until it becomes a pattern, which means it has to happen many times. So, just take a deep breath and ask yourself, are you drawn to like these emotionally unavailable men? Are you drawn to men who are like hot and cold, right? Like one minute it seems like they're totally into you and maybe they're telling you all the things you want to hear, but then they're not answering messages, or they're not answering questions, or they're ignoring you, or these are the patterns that we can start to see in these relationships. If their behavior is controlling or unpredictable or manipulative, right? We become the ones who then are overgiving, right? We're putting everything we can into the relationship. We're trying to show them, hey, I'm a good partner. We're over explaining. We're trying to get them to understand. We're trying to get things to make sense. We're trying to get it right. We're watching, like they're testing things out. It's like, if I do this, what response do I get? Well, maybe today it's a good response, and then tomorrow it's nothing. So we're trying to like make the relationship work. And there's a lot of anxiety that will develop. It may not happen right at first, because a lot of times when we're dating somebody, we're both putting on our best self, but sometimes there's a tell if you're paying attention. And if you know what to look for, it can be very obvious in the beginning. It takes a lot of mental energy from us. It could take like a lot of emotional energy, and we can confuse that intensity with connection. But it's actually our nervous system being activated, not regulated. And there's the difference, right? When our nervous system is activated, it's that feeling of excitement. When it's regulated, it feels safe.
Quick note, if you're dating after 40 and wondering where to focus your time, I made a free guide for you. It's called The Top 5 Dating Apps for Women Over 40 and How to Spot Unavailable Guys Fast. It shows you where emotionally available guys are actually showing up and how to avoid wasting time on the wrong ones. You can download it right now at stopchasingunavailableguys.com. Okay, back to the episode. The safe part might be, like you said, the unfamiliar, something that doesn't feel like, it just feels odd. Or, I used to find that I always needed something to do in the relationship, or to have a role, or to, I've got to fix the other person. I've got to fix the way things are going. If there's weird circumstances, I've got to make sure that those get fixed also. And just taking the emotional labor on myself, and just getting into that pattern. So that is definitely a tell. And then the end of that is like dating burnout, exhaustion, just feeling like, oh my God, I'm so tired. And you're so tired because you're pretty much doing everything.
Yeah, you're carrying the whole relationship. Maybe you had to do that when you were young, right? That's the pattern.
That's the familiarity. So this is where sometimes women might get confused, because, there are men out there who are a problem, or they're not, dateable, they're unavailable, whatever it is. But, what I think you're saying is like, it's not really about the guy, it's about the pattern. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because we're choosing familiar. It's the self-abandonment pattern. It's the self-abandonment loop. So the core issue is self-abandonment. That's the choice that's wrong. And it feels wrong, but we think it's the guy. And we think if he would change, we would be happy. But he's just being who he is. There's so many people out in the world. People are just being who they are. We're the ones that choose, and that's where your power is, right? That's where the change is. We're the ones that choose who we're going to give our energy and attention to. So I sometimes phrase it like life is like this giant kitchen full of ingredients, and maybe you don't like dill. So if you're going to go in and you're going to cook yourself a delicious meal, you're just not going to lose that spice. The dill isn't bad. It's not a bad spice. It's not what you want for what you want to make in the kitchen that day. So instead of saying the dill is bad or the guy is bad, it's your choice, right? They're just there. It's you deciding like, am I going to add this to what I'm creating in my life, or am I going to make a different choice? I think we can all agree that we do not have control over other people.
It's not the greatest thing to agree to, but for control freaks like myself, but yeah, it is true.
And me too. And I'd ask myself, well, why do I need to control? It's because that's how I've convinced myself that's how I feel safe. If I can control things, then I can feel safe. And that's an illusion because I can't control other people, but I can control what's going on with me. And this was part of the transformation, the big change in myself. What's happening when we're focusing on other people is that we're disconnecting from ourselves in order to maintain that connection with somebody else. And it becomes this loop, right? Like something triggers us, right? I don't feel safe. We feel anxious. Then we overfunction. Then we get this temporary closeness, and then we get disappointment, and then the cycle repeats. And it's not that we don't know better. I mean, we know, but it's that our body's trained to prioritize connection over the self. Human beings are wired we're social creatures, and we are wired to bond with other human beings, and we will override common sense to keep that connection. And that is where we need to make that effort to change if we want something different than what we've been experiencing. It's not the connection that's bad. It's the overriding what we see is the truth and what is actually happening.
That's a really good point, because it kind of brings it back to that empowerment piece where it's like, you're doing it and you're spending all the energy in the pattern, and to stop blaming yourself and start getting into how to break the pattern instead of staying in that loop of, I can't believe I'm doing this, I'm doing it again, and stopping that and actually thinking about, okay, how can I break the pattern? So what would you say is actually going to break that pattern?
That is the question, right? That's the $100,000 question. And this is where most people get stuck, like you said, because we think if I understand it, I can change it. But awareness is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg. There's all this stuff underneath it that we're not seeing yet. Okay. So real change happens with structure. And this is what I do. I teach people this through 3 phases. The first phase is release. The second is reclaim. And the third is rebuild. So the release phase is where you start to understand your patterns and your triggers, and you make a conscious decision to catch these patterns in the moment and let them go. That is releasing it. So that's like the first part. And then the reclaim part is where you rebuild your relationship with yourself, your boundaries, your self-trust, your values. Like really, getting to know yourself, that there's that brutally honest part, like, what do I really want? Not what I think is what that person said or this person says. What do I really want? And our emotional regulation. It's so important to be able to regulate ourselves emotionally so that we can recognize when we're getting caught up in those old patterns. And we're not making decisions from fear and scarcity, because that's also a trap. And then the final phase is rebuild. And this is where we learn to show up differently in relationships. And we can't do this part until we do the other parts, because it's like a system. If you take one piece out, it's going to completely fall apart. But learning how to show up differently in relationships means, improving our communication skills, not just with other people, with ourselves. What is my body communicating to me? What is my intuition communicating to me? What am I actually seeing evidence of that is communicating something to me? Decision making and choosing differently. Most women stay in awareness. They think, oh yeah, I know this thing, I know this thing, I know this thing. And then they're trying to figure out how to change it. But the transformation happens when you move through all of these phases. And it takes time, and it takes consistency, and it takes practice.
It's not a one and done. It's not all of a sudden you're going to be perfect at it, because the perfectionism can always come in at any point saying, oh, you're not doing this. You're not using this framework, good enough. But I like this. It's a very easy framework to follow. And it sounds like it's something that you can do, on repeat, like just use in different situations and circumstances and go through those 3 phases, as needed.
Yes, this is a continual process that I am still doing every day. I'm happily married, and I'm still identifying my old thought patterns and catching them and going, whoa, look at that. Isn't that interesting? Is that really helping me here? Is that, maybe I don't want to think that way anymore. Maybe what I want to think instead is that I'm worthy, that I deserve to be honest and, and say what's on my mind, even though maybe I'm not sure how my partner is going to take what I'm going to say. And then do it, right? Because that's like a little quick example of doing that framework, but this is something that gets to be done all the time, every day, over and over and over again. Remember, your old framework, you've been doing it for years. You've been doing it so long that you don't even think about it. You're not even aware of it anymore. So becoming aware of it and then intentionally saying, not that program, not that framework, not that way, a new way, and just consistently practicing the new way, doing the new thing. And it eventually gets easier, but you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be fixed. That old wiring is still going to be there. And it's our responsibility to continue to work on our personal development, developing ourselves over time, consistently over time, to the day we die. And that's a privilege. That's like an honor to give that to ourselves.
Yeah. And I know a lot of the listeners are like me as a lifelong learner, and you just really have that, wouldn't say longing. It's the same kind of longing, but it's a different thing where you just long to be more connected to yourself and have that in an interaction with other people in relationships. And you can do it in the dating phase. And then when you find someone who's really safe and it feels like a very deeply connected relationship, then you can continue it on. And I know with my husband, I do the same thing as you were saying. It's like, I still have these patterns that I find come up, and in a healthy relationship, sometimes it's safe enough where you're like, wow, this is a big door that just opened. Like, this is here to heal. And, it happens to be safe enough that you can work through it with them and with yourself. So it does continue on as a lifelong thing, like you were saying. And so maybe the listeners might be like, well, I don't really even know what healthy love feels like. So how would you describe healthy love to someone who's used to chaos?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really important one because I didn't know. I didn't know the answer to that until I started like learning from people who had healthy relationships, right? I didn't have good role models, and clearly my history wasn't, positive and working out for me. So seeing other people's relationships that were healthy kind of gave me a sense. And I remember seeing, these examples, and not just like romantic relationships. Some of them were romantic. Like I would see the way, a husband would, and a husband and wife would have an interaction. It could be at the grocery store, right? One time I heard a coworker, talking about how she was going to rearrange her vacation, so that her daughter felt better about something. And I was just like, is that what people do? Is like, that would never been my experience. So exposing yourself to examples of what healthy love can look like, but what it can feel like is very unfamiliar at first, right? It's not super intense. It's not anxiety producing. It's not confusing. It's not confusing. If you're confused, something's going on. It's calm. It's consistent. It's predictable in a good way. And for somebody who's used to emotional roller coasters, it can actually feel boring, uncomfortable and boring. And then we'll go, well, I'm just not attracted to him. I guess he's not doing it for me. But what he's doing is what you say you want, right? So it's going to feel uncomfortable at first. And being uncomfortable and having those feelings or thoughts, that's not a problem. What's happening is it's that recalibration of your nervous system, which you're probably not used to.
Yeah, but it's worthwhile. It is very worthwhile to get to the other side and to feel that sense of safety and being held. I remember someone I talked to once was like, they wish that they could feel like they were held, in every way. And I describe it as feeling like I'm home. So these are some things that you can take in and say, well, I want this feeling of home, and I want this feeling of being held. And it's exactly the way you described, this process of, what they can start doing to get there. And so with anyone listening right now and thinking, this really resonated with me, this conversation, and I feel like I'm ready to see what's going on next, what should they do?
Yeah, this is the moment where awareness turns into action, because once you see the pattern, you have the power. So if you're listening to this and you're realizing, wow, this is exactly what I keep doing, but I don't fully understand why, the next step is to identify your specific pattern. And this is really important. Different people are driven by different underlying dynamics. Not all codependency patterns are the same. So if you don't know what is driving yours, you'll keep repeating it. So the most important step, again, is to identify your specific pattern. So I've created a quiz called Uncover Your Hidden Barriers, and it helps you identify what's actually underneath your attraction, especially if you keep finding yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable or inconsistent partners. And so it only takes a few minutes, and it'll give you a lot of clarity on what's really going on so that you can start making different choices.
And that sounds wonderful. I love a good quiz. They're always so enlightening. So I'm going to have that in the show notes that you can take the quiz and start on your journey to uncover those hidden barriers and find the love that we've been speaking about. And also the important part is like the journey that you're on with yourself, which I always say is the most important part, is that journey home to your true self. So I really appreciate all your wisdom, Pi, and your vulnerability and your sharing your story. And I know it's going to be really helpful to the listeners today.
Oh, thank you, Eleanor. I hope so. I really do. Because like you said, this journey is so worth it. Like you said, it could be hard, it could be uncomfortable, it can, there's a lot to unpack. It's okay to get support on this process. It's best to get support on this process. I highly, highly, highly want to encourage people to get support wherever that is for you. But moving through this will bring you to that place of having consistent, available, true, healthy connection with another person, which I know is what everybody listening to this podcast wants. They wouldn't be listening if they didn't.
Exactly. And that's why I always like to say that love is closer than you think. That's my little mantra, because it just brings home the reality of, this can happen. This is available for you. And it's not something that's going to take the next 20 years to have happen. It's a lot closer than you think. So thank you so much for being here, Pi, and everyone listening. I will see you next time.